Quote, "The world is filled with people who are no longer needed, and who are trying to make slaves of all of us. Well, they have their music, and we have ours." Woody Guthrie. End quote. Hello, it's the Happy Hermit, taking those country roads to all you West Virginia mountain mamas to talk about Barbara Kingsolver's demon Copperhead. Anthony Bourdain has an interesting quote about the state. "Here, in the heart of every belief system I've mocked or fought against, I was welcomed with open arms by everybody. This is relevant, for it's at the very heart of what Barbara Kingsolver is writing about." I don't normally go on too much about the authors of these books because I honestly don't think it's relevant. One thing about modern culture is it seems to have an incredibly difficult time separating the artist from the art, and I think it's a mistake to discuss a creator rather than the work. Good people can make bad art, and bad people can make good art, and the quality of work has nothing to do with whether I personally agree with it. But I'm about to break my rule because Kingsolver intends this to be a social novel, and her personality somehow comes through. The best way I could describe it is as your favorite English teacher or your favorite librarian. She's somebody who knows how things have worked and observes what happens around her and cares about her community. That caring is important because it's the difference between writing from the outside versus writing from the inside. First, let's start with the blurb on the back of the book. Quote, "A masterpiece of contemporary American fiction, Demon Copperhead captures the heart as it evokes a young hero's unforgettable journey to maturity in the mountains of southern Appalachia. Demon Copperhead is the story of a boy born to a teenage single mother in a single-wide trailer with no assets beyond his dead father's good looks and copper-colored hair, a caustic wit, and a fierce talent for survival. In a plot that never pauses for breath, relayed in its own unsparing voice, Demon braves the modern perils of foster care, child labor, derelict schools, athletic success, addiction, disastrous loves, and crushing losses. Through all of it, he reckons with his own invisibility in a popular culture where even the superheroes have abandoned rural people in favor of cities." Many generations ago, Charles Dickens wrote David Copperfield from his experience as a survivor of institutional poverty and its damages to children in his society. These problems have yet to be solved in ours. Dickens is not a prerequisite for readers of this novel, but he provided its inspiration. In transposing his epic novel to her own place and time, Kingsolver has enlisted his anger and compassion, and above all, his faith in the transformative powers of a good story. Demon speaks for a new generation of lost boys, and all those born into beautiful, cursed places they can't imagine leaving behind. End quote. I want to assure you that you absolutely don't need to read David Copperfield for this book. David Copperfield was the first grown-up book I read as a child, and I've since reread it many times. And personally, I found it to be a distraction because I was constantly trying to line up characters and situations between the books. David Copperfield is more useful as a sort of model for the story we're being told here, the social tale. Demon Copperhead is intended as examining how we live now. It's important to understand Demon's character first, because we spend the whole book with him. Understanding the book requires you to understand him first and foremost. Before going any further, I'm going to warn about spoilers, because you can't talk about literature without talking about the whole book. Essentially, Demon Copperhead is an addiction journal, with an adult demon going back and telling his life story to take responsibility for his situation at the end. So the whole book is an account for how he ended up as a recovering opiate addict and budding artist. It's helpful to keep that in mind, because the whole book is Demon looking for patterns both in himself and in the world to determine what is and what isn't his responsibility. It's the whole part of AA and the Serenity Prayer, to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and to have the wisdom to know the difference. Demon is portrayed as a sensitive soul under a hardened exterior, growing up in hardscrabble, rural West Virginia, and one major theme of this book is the tendency for addiction is directly related to the demand that these people push down the softer, kinder parts of themselves to survive. Demon had to learn to accept his sensitivity to be able to express things like this. Quote, "I found a good rock and watched the sun melt into the Cumberlands, layers of orange like a buttermilk pie cooling on the horizon, clouds shooting past, throwing spots of light and dark over the mountain heads. The light looked drinkable, It poured on a mountain, so I saw the curve of every treetop edged in gold, like the scales of a fish. Then poured off, easing them back into shadow. I got all caught up in the show, waking from my long swim underwater. Breathing the surface is a shock, the white so white, the blue so blue, the air that's your breath. End quote. But the thing is, the capability of being this sensitive requires a person to be in a stable world. Rural West Virginia, hell, all blue-collar rural America, is a brutal environment to grow up in. Demon's experience of being passed around from household to household is not a unique one. Home and food insecurity, difficulty in keeping jobs, and most jobs paying minimal wages. The simple fact of having to travel to get basic needs met, like medical care or even supplies. It's not an environment where if something wrong happens, someone will necessarily come in to save you. You can only depend on yourself and maybe some of the personal relationships you've made along the way. This is an environment that has no room for softness, especially for men, and the same sort of environment that makes things like ill health and addiction thrive. It's a world where everything is stretched so thin that your life becomes small. The tiniest event can push things over the edge into mayhem. I'm reminded of the film Stromboli, which is about an Italian fishing village on a volcanic island where the volcano periodically erupts and wipes everything out. The people become harsh as a result. You don't do things like save for tomorrow or try to build things up under such circumstances. You do what it takes to live through today and leave tomorrow up to fate. It's a very different way of living, one which comfortable people do not understand. Rural America is in the same boat. They're also metaphorically living on the edge of a volcano. As for public aid, they're the last to get it, and it's often of poor quality when they do. It's not completely grim here, though. Women keep things going in a big way, and a point of light are what the book calls mama houses. Quote, I've been saying Mrs. Peggott this and that, so I'll go on writing it that way because the truth is embarrassing. I called her Mama. Maggot called her that, so I did too. I knew his cousins were not my cousins, nor was Mr. Peggott my grandpa. I called him Peg like everybody did. But I thought all kids got a mama, along with a caseworker and free school lunch and the canned beanie weenies they gave you in a bag to take home for weekends. Like, assigned. Where else was I going to get one? No prospects incoming from mom, foster care orphan dropout, so I got to share with Maggot. This seemed fine with Mrs. Peggott. Other than my official sleeping place being at mom's and Maggot having his own room upstairs in the Peggott house, she played no favorites. Same hostess cakes, same cowboy shirts she made for us both with the fringe on the sleeves, same little smack on the shoulder with her knuckles if you cussed or wore your ball cap at the table. Not to say she ever hit hard, but Christ Jesus, the tongue thrashings. To look at her, the small granny-type individual with her short gray hair and mom jeans and flat yellow sandals, you're going to think, nothing at all here to stand in my way. The little do you know. If you're going to steal or trash talk your betters or break her tomato plants or get caught huffing her hairspray out of a paper bag, the lady could scold the hair off your head. End quote. You can find their homes in every small town. They're the ones with the porch streamers and gazing balls, the front porch with the couch on it, or sometimes the plastic yard furniture. They often have a kitchen garden, birdhouses, an old swing set, and a herd of children, both related and unrelated, playing in the yard. These women are the invisible backbone of rural America. They're the ones who frequently keep up with these kids as their parents are frequently either overworked, imprisoned, addicted, or otherwise out for the count. These are safe places. These ladies may not be able to fix people's shitty homes, but they can make sure there's a place to go where kids will get fed and patched up when they need it. It's also a direct contrast to the social workers in this book who are understaffed, underpaid, and cannot provide this sort of safety because they don't have the resources for it. Look at this description of Miss Barks, the social worker. Quote, so here is Miss Barks in her first real job, 22 years old, working her little heart out for the DSS, and hitting the books at all hours because she pretty desperately wants to live in her own tiny apartment instead of sharing with a slob, and for that you need to climb up the paycheck pole for first grade teacher. That's how they pay you at DSS. Old Baggy has been at it so long she's got no more reason to live, working 2 shifts a day, going home to her crap duplex in Duffield, owned by her cousin, who gives her a break on the rent. If you are the kid sitting across from her in your caseworker meeting, wearing your 2 black eyes and the hoodie reeking of cat piss, sorry dude, but she's thinking about what TV show she'll watch that night. Any human person with gumption would have moved on to something else by now, the military, or selling insurance, or being a cop, or even a teacher, because DSS pay is basically the fuck you peanut butter sandwich type of paycheck. That's what the big world thinks it's worth, to save the white trash orphans." End quote. We're in a society that pays a lot of lip service to helping the less fortunate, but if you can see how it is at the other end, the help you get is often ineffective, poorly motivated, or selfish. He also talks about the Christmas parties the poor kids are invited to so they can basically be used as morality advertising, props to make other people feel good about themselves. In fact, that seems to be the main role the rural poor have in our society, to be the butt of redneck jokes and the excuse for political parties to run things poorly. They get blamed for things like racism, violence, drug addiction, ignorance, and filth, when all classes have these problems, but only the poor are defined by these problems. They're seen as hopelessly backwards, like there's nothing anybody can do about them, that they live as they do just out of sheer ignorance and nothing else, and that their situation is somehow completely self-inflicted. When you're living in a situation where public resources are slim and poorly managed, where popular culture uses you as the butt of jokes, where your people do not get the opportunity to speak back, and the cultural landscape behaves as if you never existed, you lose faith in any kind of public system, because even the well-meaning people do not know how to help you. Demon Copperhead gives a broad overview as to why these areas are so poor. Farming, the first reason why people settled there, is no longer profitable on smaller scale. Most production is from mega farms that are heavily subsidized, and modern life just doesn't work for a business that you have one short season to recoup a year's losses. The only thing left there to grow is tobacco, which is poisonous not only as a product, but Demon gets deathly ill from tobacco poisoning through the harvest. Coal mines were the big business that moved into Appalachia, but a combination of automation and a lesser dependence on coal for fuel meant they no longer hired that many workers. These jobs were also punishing, with the miners often leaving with lung problems and other disabilities. We see a pattern of big business literally taking from the bodies of these people and then leaving them to rot where they're no longer in use. Dory's father, suffering from mesothelioma, a cancer from a lifetime of working with asbestos. And finally, we get to the prescription opioids, the miracle pills that solved pain with, the public was assured, no addiction or side effects. This was not true, and while there have been lawsuits and such, not much has gone the way of a whole generation of folks addicted to these pills. The ones who get dope sick and now can barely function. Every power that has gone through has exploited the local population and then abandoned them. Quote, "What the companies did was put the shut hole on any choice other than going into the mines. Not just here, also in Buchanan, Tazewell, all of eastern Kentucky, these counties got bought up whole. Land, hospitals, courthouses, schools, company-owned. Nobody needed to get all that educated for being a miner, so they let the schools go to rot. And they made sure no mills or factories got in the door. Coal only. To this day, you have to cross a lot of ground to find other work. Not an accident," Mr. Armstrong said, and for once we believed him, because down in the dark mess of our little skull closets, some puzzle pieces were clicking together, and our world made some terrible kind of sense. The dads at home drinking beer in their underwear, the moms at the grocery with their SNAP coupons, the army recruiters in shiny gold buttons come to harvest their jackpot of hopeless futures. God damn." End quote. Demon Copperhead's point is that we are a product of our environment, and that the way people behave makes perfect sense within their environment. We've got a group of people who have land but no money in an area of the country that offers limited education and mostly service jobs which will never let you save enough to move up. You can say these facts, and some people will completely refuse to admit that these are limiting factors, that folks are lazy and looking for handouts, that they could find their way out if they only worked hard enough, that basically anybody that's any good should leave. But why should they leave? Why shouldn't people be able to have comfortable, healthy lives, decent work, with time to take care of their kids and loved ones, just like people in cities and suburbs frequently have? Why are they so functionally invisible that they only get seen when they're acting out or somebody does something crazy? Demon tabs it up to the pecking order. Quote, "I tried to explain the whole human being aspect of everybody needing to dump on somebody. Stepdad smacks mom, mom yells at the kid finds the dog and kicks it. We're the dog of America. Every make-up person now has their proper nouns, except for some reason, us. Hicks, rednecks, not capitalized. I guess I'd seen the world somewhat, with our division games when they called us trailer trash and threw garbage at us. And TV, obviously. Chiller TV was running this entire hillbilly hater marathon. Hunter's Blood, Lunch Meat, Redneck Zombies, and the comedy shows, even worse, with these guys acting like we're all on the same side, but just wait. I dated a Kentucky girl once, and she was always lying through her tooth. Ha 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 ha. End quotes. We like to put pop culture off to one side, claim it doesn't count, even with a president who emerged from the river of pop culture that floods us every day. This product is pumped out by companies to make money, and yes, they typically tend to have material that is bullying to whoever is on the bottom of the heap to make us feel better about ourselves. It's gotten even worse with social media. It doesn't make a difference in whether you personally indulge in this stuff. Poor bashing media will continue to proliferate as long as American culture views poor people as inferior. Demon Copperhead goes through all the ways we treat the rural poor as inferior, through the businesses we allow to exploit, through the mismanaged and insufficient resources sent to help them, through the patronizing attitudes we adapt towards them, to the stereotypes of them that we use as our entertainment. But, for all this misery, all these problems, Demon offers a solution, or at least a step forward, through art. Throughout the whole book, Demon uses art to cope. At first, it's copying superheroes he likes, but some teachers notice he has some talent, so he gets some encouragement and training to push his art to the next level. Later on, he makes a comic strip called Redneck, which, inspired by local history, has an old-timey miner come through and save the day for rural townsfolk, one example being providing power to a home that had electricity cut off. He emphasizes the beauty of the landscape and the sense of community that could thrive, encouraging folks to turn towards the better angels of their nature. I understand, it sounds idealistic, but it's true. Art helps the creator cope, and it also helps the audience. It creates identity and community, provides role models and expression. One interesting aspect of Demon Copperhead is how much pop culture seeps into everything here. The characters are constantly mentioning millennial pop culture figures, whether it's the Spice Girls or Survivor or Faith Hill, like the comic book heroes that Demon copies early on in the book. They're easily imitated, but also flat, making art from a world that does not talk about addiction or hardship, an unreal place where bills are never due, jobs are never lost, you can be anything you want, and every relationship gets a happily ever after. Escapism has its place, but it's important that we have art, music, and stories from the real world about real living. We can't sustain ourselves on superheroes, sitcoms, and pop princesses alone. You end up getting intellectually flabby, losing touch. Joan Didion says that we tell ourselves stories in order to live, and the quality of your life is partially determined by the stories you feed yourself. Is it any wonder why half the world is sitting around waiting for some superhero to save the day, rather than getting out and creating the world they want for themselves? Is it also any wonder that on social media you will see constant complaining about how insufficient pop culture is? There, all of the culture seems to be one giant argument about whose glossy icons are better than whose. People aren't brave enough to tell their own stories, so it turns into which K-pop band is better, or Marvel versus DC, or how Call of Duty is ruined by woke culture. These arguments will never be resolved because they're not real. They're just the avatars for real concerns and real need. It takes real guts to say, this is what my life really looks like and these are the things that scare me, partially because we have a culture that likes to kick people when they're down. I want to encourage people to make the songs and arts and stories about their lives. These things aren't going to be slick like you see coming from the culture factories and AI bots of the world. They'll be messy, homespun, filled with irregularities, and that's how they should be. We shouldn't be trying to live the lives of superheroes and pop stars. They should be trying to live their lives like us. I want to close this with this poem by Carl Sandburg. Quote, I am the people, the mob, the crowd, the mass. Do you know that all the great work of the world is done through me? I am the working man, the inventor, the maker of the world's food and clothes. I'm the audience that witnesses history. The Napoleons come for me, and the Lincolns. They die, and then I send forth more Napoleons and Lincolns. I am the seed ground. I am a prairie that will stand for much plowing. Terrible storms pass over me. I forget. The best of me is sucked out and wasted. I forget. Everything but death comes to me and makes me work and give up what I have, and I forget. Sometimes I growl, shake myself and spatter a few red drops for history to remember. Then, I forget. When I, the people, learn to remember, when I, the people, use the lessons of yesterday and no longer forget who robbed me last year, who played me for a fool, then there will be no speaker in all the world say the name, the people, with any fleck of a sneer in his voice or any far-off smile of derision. The mob, the crowd, the mass, will arrive then. End quote. Go out and make beautiful things, and happy reading!